Gerrymanders are only as effective as the results of elections are consistent. So if all the same voters vote the same way, you can gerrymander to your heart's content and get the results you expect.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugin. Today on the show, so Republicans are winning the redistricting battle. But how are Democrats fighting back to save their congressional seats before the midterms? Plus, the Supreme Court is going to allow access to the abortion pill by mail for now. Have the justices who overturned Roe v. Wade changed their minds? Up first, though, following a series of court victories, including at the Supreme Court, Republican lawmakers have been rapidly redrawing congressional maps across the country. Now, part of the reason for that is the GOP has full control of state governments in more places than Democrats. So Democrats have less options to redraw their own maps ahead of the midterm elections. But how successful will these Republican efforts be in the end? And how are Democrats trying to fight back? For that, I want to bring in NBC News senior political reporter Jane Timm. Hi, Jane.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Great to have you. So last month, the Supreme Court struck down Louisiana's previous congressional map, declaring it an unconstitutional racial gerrymander in a 6-3 decision. Since that decision was handed down, there has been a flurry of new redistricting happening. With this new legal backing behind them, what is the Republican strategy here going forward? And take me through the roundup of other states that are now jumping on board.
Yeah, the Republican strategy is really just to draw as many new maps as they can before the midterms. And the ones they can't draw this year, they're going to draw them next year. The Supreme Court ruling gutted the racial gerrymandering protections that existed in federal law, giving Republican legislators who control the map drawing process in a lot of southern states the ability to, at long last, go after the Democrats that are still in their congressional delegations. So those districts had previously been protected by the Voting Rights Act, where they said, you can draw these districts to be a majority minority. You can account for your minority voters in your redistricting plans. Now they're not going to do that, and they can say partisanship is our top goal in our map drawing process and redraw it completely. So you've seen South Carolina is just starting that process. Tennessee redrew their congressional map to eliminate a black district. Alabama, Louisiana, they're working through to get rid of their black districts to send more Republicans to Congress. It's going to eliminate a lot of black lawmakers in Congress, and it's going to send more Republicans to the House, which is exactly what the Republican Party and President Trump at the top of it are hoping to do with this.
So along with this decision, there has been a weakening, it seems, of the Voting Rights Act because of what came out of the Supreme Court. Top Democrats have warned that a third of the Congressional Black Caucus could be wiped out in this redistricting battle. But you have House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who said Dems are not backing down.
We're not going to unilaterally disarm. Not now, not ever. And this redistricting war is just getting started.
So you talk about how Republicans are basically hoping and redrawing so that they can gain more seats, continue to control the House and the Senate come November. You're hearing Hakeem Jeffries say, we're not backing down. We're going to keep fighting. But how do they keep fighting? What tools do they have?
Yeah, they say they're going to keep fighting. They're going to, draw maps, but there's not much they can do right now. They can try and compete in states like Virginia, where the map was tossed by the courts. They can try and push on these swing districts. They can try and look where they find where some of these new lines are softer for Republicans, where, they're just more of a competitive seat. They can try and flip them there or turn them into dummy-manders.
What is a dummy-mander?
A dummy-mander is where a party tries to gerrymander and essentially they fly too close to the sun, if you will. They make it so that the lines are so narrow that the other party can then flip the seat. So in places like Florida, where Republicans are hoping and drawing maps based on previous election results, they may see If Democrats have a really good year, those election results might not pan out. Gerrymanders are only as effective as the results of elections are consistent. So if all the same voters vote the same way, you can gerrymander to your heart's content and get the results you expect. But if voters switch sides or they split ticket vote, which means to vote for one candidate top of the ticket and one candidate lower ticket, you can see different results. Americans are not always as predictable as their politicians would like.
Talk me through the possibility that this redistricting battle doesn't necessarily work in the favor of Republicans and or Democrats, depending on what district we're talking about, because we've seen examples of that happen before.
Yeah, and I think there was some fears that this decision would essentially just eliminate the Democratic Party for a generation. That's not going to happen, in large part because America's already really, really gerrymandered. There's not a lot of seats they can target. It truly is Black voting power that they're going to have to eliminate almost completely to get a few extra seats. And what's more, like we said, you can't just draw districts. You have to win them too. That means you need strong candidates who can win in districts where voters are willing to change their mind. Places where Donald Trump saw really big gains last cycle, with minority voters, with Latino voters, particularly in the South and in Texas, those districts might see swing voters or split ticket voters. You can definitely see different results. And I also should point out that at some point, but Americans hate gerrymandering. They don't like it. And the more we continue to gerrymander, there may be a backlash here to both parties, depending on who's doing the gerrymandering, where people are kind of sick of it. You know what I mean? We're going to see new maps all through next year, where you're going to see Democrats are already working hard to compete in states like Minnesota, to get a referendum through in Colorado, to redraw map after map after map. We're going to be doing this until the next census is completed and we start the process all over again. Some people may get sick of that and may start pushing through changes to state governments or advocating for federal policy that gets rid of this kind of partisan gerrymandering that is, at this point, relentless.
What reflects that Americans don't like gerrymandering? Where have we seen evidence of this?
Oh, polling across the board. People do not like it. If you ask them, do you want your politicians to pick which voters should be electing them? In polls across the board, Democrats, Republicans, no one really likes it. They do like winning, though.
We're in the primary calendar right now. There is a primary race tomorrow in Louisiana. On Tuesday, we got Alabama, Georgia, Idaho, Kentucky, Oregon, Pennsylvania as well. How are these new maps going to impact these races, if at all?
Yeah, this is something that has just never been tested before in politics that I can even remember. The idea that people will be voting and those votes just won't count, and then they'll be asked to vote again. So in places where they've redone the map and the primary is underway, they're literally tossing out the congressional votes in those districts. So Wes Allen was out there in Alabama this week saying, all those House votes, they will not count. They'll be thrown out, and then we'll do it again. I mean, Alabama's legislation to prepare themselves for the court ruling that they did get this week that allowed them to use their new map essentially said, we'll hold a primary and we'll plan to just toss out the results if we can get our new map in time. I don't think Americans have a real strong understanding or personal experience with the idea that those votes aren't going to count because of this redistricting thing. I think it's going to definitely confuse voters. You may see turnout affected there, and you're also going to see in Louisiana, they're going to go back to a jungle primary. So they're going to elevate to the runoff the top two vote getters, which may not benefit the Republican candidates. It's not going to be a single primary runoff. It's going to be a everybody runoff.
So they won't be told necessarily when they go to vote that they are actually in the wrong district because of these newly drawn maps.
They're going to be allowed to check a box, and then that box, it just won't go anywhere. It won't count. And then there'll be another election, and they'll go and see sort of which candidate's on the ballot.
Wow. Jane, Timm, thank you, as always.
Thanks.
So nationwide access to the abortion pill mifepristone by mail can continue for now. On Thursday, the Supreme Court granted emergency requests brought by two drug makers to block a lower court ruling that would have restricted access to mifepristone in some states. Louisiana had challenged a Biden-era FDA regulation that allows the pill to be sent by mail without an in-person appointment with a clinician. So why did the same court that overturned Roe v. Wade hand abortion rights advocates a win here? And is it going to hold up? For this, I want to bring in Laura Jarrett, senior legal correspondent for NBC News. Hey, Laura.
So happy to be here.
So there are several pieces going into this latest ruling from the court. Explain for us the underlying case here and why it is the court granted a stay that allows mifepristone to be accessible by mail for now, by the way, and that's the key word here, for now.
The state of Louisiana has tried to get mifepristone, which is one of the most common abortion pills used in the country, every day across the country. Instead of trying to get it taken off the market, they're trying to make it harder to get because they know blue states are shipping in abortion pills to Louisiana, which has an abortion ban like so many other southern states. So they say, okay, what can we do to stop the flow of pills into Louisiana? We can try to roll back some of the regulations that the FDA put in place. After COVID, they said you can use it telehealth, you can get it by the mail, just so people didn't have to go in person. At one point, you had to go in person 3 times to get the pill.
Wow.
So the FDA says, let's make it easier to get after COVID. Louisiana says, aha, that's how we're going to go after it. We're going to go after the FDA regulations and say the FDA didn't do enough to test the safety of getting it by the mail versus going in person. And they managed to get the Fifth Circuit to say, yep, you're right. And so they managed to get those regulations that made it easier to get put on hold. Now, the FDA says, hey, we're taking a look at the pill, too, to make sure it's still safe. They could have said, well, wait till the FDA goes through its safety review, but they did not. And so that's what caused all this flurry of activity because the Fifth Circuit, that Court of Appeals said, yep, we're going to block the pill by mail. Therefore, the maker of the pill says, oh, no, you're not. And they appeal it all up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court yesterday says, we don't want anything to do with this, but we're just going to press pause on everything and maintain access to the pill.
I think what's interesting, though, is this is the same court that overturned Roe with the Dobbs decision. Is there anything to make of this?
So I think you got to think about it in a couple different ways. What Dobbs does is it kicks the issue of abortion back to the states.
Yeah.
The issue around the abortion pill is really much more of a regulatory issue, and it's a question of the FDA's rules, and did the FDA follow its own process? Did it do enough to evaluate the safety of it? And so it really isn't the same issue because the states are not the ones to get to determine the safety and efficacy of an FDA-approved drugs.
Got it.
Right? That's what the federal government is there for. That's the whole point of having that agency. And so the Supreme Court actually ruling in favor of abortion advocates here, you can't make too much of it because they're just like comparing apples and oranges. This is not doing any favors.
Same thing. It's not the same arguments.
It's not the same arguments. This is not like a ruling in favor of the abortion pill. I've heard that described.
Yeah.
And as you said in the intro, it's only for now.
Yeah.
So this is not a ruling on the merits.
Kicking the can down the road.
This is kicking the can down the road.
I think what's incredible about mifepristone that a lot of people don't know is how readily it's used.
Yes.
Louisiana's Attorney General noted in court papers that despite her state having an almost total ban on abortion, roughly 1,000 abortions a month take place in that state because of mifepristone pills. How does that track with other states across the country and their usage of mifepristone?
All the data that I have seen will show you that abortion rates have mostly held steady since the Dobbs decision rolled back Roe v. Wade, which tells you telehealth and being able to get it through the mail have to be huge because otherwise all these places with in-person abortion bans would be bringing down the numbers writ large. Does that make sense, right? Like if across the country,
right? If you had a ban on access to abortions, you would think that then
you would see a massive drop off,
but you're not.
But you're not because my guess is if we dug behind those numbers, you would see blue states like California, Illinois, New York are shipping out tons of pills all over the country.
Also, I think what people don't know is mifepristone is also used after miscarriages, not just for abortions.
And this is where the
which, by the way, saves women's lives.
And this is where you saw people going nuts. The last time mifepristone was in front of the Supreme Court, and in that case, it was about taking it off the market entirely, right? They wanted to strip it off entirely, and it was brought by a group of advocates. But they were anti-abortion advocates and doctors who did not want to prescribe mifepristone. They did not want to use it at all, but they wanted to get it taken off the market. And in that case, the Supreme Court said, okay, those people don't even want to use it. They don't even have standing to be here. This one's a little bit of a different issue. And so it's not clear that the Supreme Court would come out the same way if they took it up on the merits.
Could the administration eventually limit access to mifepristone if they wanted to, as the FDA is reviewing the safety protocols?
Absolutely.
How would they go about doing that?
So the FDA would have to roll back its own regulations, and the FDA can do that. They have the authority to do that. But I think the question will be, what new safety data are they relying on that makes them think that this drug that has been used now for more than 20 years, what are they seeing?
Yeah.
That's
what
different?
new are they seeing?
What new are they seeing? And I think there's a political calculation for the president. This is the most commonly used pill. There are people who support President Trump that are using this pill.
Right.
So I just think there's a science piece of this, there's a law piece of this, and there's a politics piece of this. And it's one of those issues where all of them are intersecting.
And I think also something that we have looked at over the years, especially as we got closer and closer to a potential decision when it came to Dobbs, is abortion access is popular across the country, even amongst conservative voters.
Yes.
Is this eventually going to end up back at the Supreme Court based on its merits?
110%. Looks like you have been studying your Supreme Court procedure.
But we don't know the timing of that.
It will take months. It will not be this. Yeah, I would be shocked if they even get it before they go out for summer recess.
So before we go, you have another special episode coming out tomorrow on Saturday.
For those
doing double duty, because you're hosting Today's Show in the morning, and then you have this piece coming out as well.
Look at you with the double T's, okay? You didn't even mention.
Which, by the way, I'm going to be on the Today Show with Laura tomorrow morning as well, so I'll tease for myself.
So extra reason to tune into the Today Show. Because Yaz is on with me on a completely unrelated subject.
No, but you're doing this incredible series on the Supreme Court over the month of May, the second of which is coming out tomorrow.
Yes.
What can we expect tomorrow?
So throughout the month, we've been talking to lawyers and also legal historians. And we've been talking about the big cases that are in this term because there's so many important issues to people's lives. So we've been talking about birthright citizenship. We've talking this week about transgender rights, in particular the big transgender sports cases that are in front of the court. And so I interviewed David Cole. He's a very well-known constitutional lawyer at the ACLU. And he explains to me how he won the case on behalf of Amy Stevens, who was fired for being transgender. She was fired from her job. And they did not make any secret about why they were firing her. But before that point, there had never been any definitive ruling from the Supreme Court that transgender people are protected under Title VII. So David Cole won that case. And the interesting thing is that I asked him what he thinks the chances are the athletes who want to play on the girls' team that are transgender will win in their case, given his landmark win. He set the precedent. He's not so sure they're going to win.
It's an issue on which reasonable people can differ. It's a hard issue. If you view the purpose of sports in school as participation, then, why shouldn't you allow trans women to participate and trans girls to participate on the women's team or the girls' team? However, there's also an argument that sports is about competition and that there are advantages that boys have, particularly after puberty, that girls don't have.
So that's going to be in your feed tomorrow morning, Saturday morning at 5 a.m. So be sure to listen to that. Thank you, Laura.
Please tune in.
That is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. We're actually going to be back tomorrow with another special episode of Here's the Scoop Supreme Court Edition, hosted by my friend and colleague, Laura Jarrett. For now, if you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.